Farm technology is constantly changing. When you're working with farmers, you soon realise that it's either upgrading, advancing, or it's become obsolete before it's even got itself into the farm tractor. We've trialled the use of satellite as one tool with funding through the National Land Care Program and the technical advice from Rural Directions and the South Australian Murray-Darling Basin NRM Board. So what we have trialled is implemented an investigation to the use of satellite imagery as a tool to improve productivity. The satellite image measures the leaf greenness within the biomass in the paddock using NDVI, which is Normalised Difference Vegetation Index. And this we've used to identify those different zones across the paddocks, and within these differences we've identified different zones for management. The value of satellite imagery to natural resource management is that we're actually able to match land use to land capability, enabling us to give farmers recommendations to reduce the erosion, the soil risk, and managing their productivity whilst protecting their natural resource base. The value to the farmers is that they're able to remotely monitor the progress of their paddocks from their house, monitor the progress within that critical growing season, also identify those long-term trends of the paddocks, and also looking at those underperforming areas within the paddock. They're also able to match yield maps, variable rate technology and biomass, increasing their confidence in precision ag. The project we did to set out and investigate the use of historical biomass imagery to not only improve natural resource management on farm but also to test the practical application of satellite NDVI technology to the farmer. We achieved this by setting up 12 trials across the Mallee, and within this we identified different management zones through the use of NDVI on the platform from GeoSys, and to validate the different management zones we set up on-farm trials. So this is just one of our trial sites. That is a paddock, 102 hectare paddock just outside of Lameroo. The NRM issue in this paddock is the drifting sand, which you can see up in this northern corner. There's variable soil types across that paddock, and the farmer was wanting to know how to manage that soil to maximise their productivity whilst reducing the erosion risk. This is using the NDVI, these three management zones were identified. The blue is the deep sand, and you can see that actually corresponds to the deep sand, drifting sand that we saw on the aerial photograph. The brown indicates the sandy loam soil, with the yellow showing a brown loam soil. These different management zones were identified from historical biomass imagery from 2011, 2005 and 2007. It also shows clearly here that this blue line along this fence line was actually not a deep sand line. It's actually caused by the shadowing of the trees which was on the fence line. So step 2 is, once we've identified our management zones, is we actually really need to interrogate those zones to ensure that the image that we're looking at aligns with what is in the paddock. This farmer was testing the level of nitrogen within his soils across three different management zones. So what we did was we actually used soil testing as part of an interrogation for those zones. And the deep sand, we came up with 50 kilograms per hectare of deep soil nitrogen, which is classified as very low, moving down to the 65 in the sandy loam, and up to a medium level, and you can see clearly the different soil types that have been taken out of the three different management zones. So what the spatial images showed us is that we have matched the different zones to the different soil types within the paddock. It is also very critical though to use the farmer's local knowledge to ground truth what the image is showing us, and the farmer's got that local knowledge which is totally invaluable to make sure that we're actually working on the same page. So once we've got all that background information, we've it's clarified and verified by the farmer and also what the image is produced, what we'll do is we set up our trial. This image shows the location of the trial, which enabled us to get good representation across the paddock, and that's a nitrogen trial which has gone across our 3 different management zones, and that is 100 metres wide. The results that we achieved within our deep sands, there were variable yield results from each of those 3 management zones. Within the deep sand we got up to 0.25 tonne per hectare, our sandy loam to 2 tonne per hectare and our 3 tonne per hectare. So basically the yield results have shown us that we are looking at 3 different management zones here. The question though for the farmer, was there any value in actually managing those 3 different management zones? So when you are actually working with farmers, they really need to know what financial benefit they're going to get out of any application or trials that they undertake. So we're using the Cyro Fertiliser Optimiser modelling. We modelled the financial benefits of working within the different management zones. And this is the table that we came up with. So basically this table is showing us that the recommended nitrogen fertiliser rate for each management zone to maximise the return to the farmer. So basically we're judging the benefit of the variable rate technology, managing the paddock in a uniform rate of applying 98 kilograms per hectare of nitrogen over the different zones. What this model has shown us is that the brown zone has been actually under-fertilised, so if you're applying 98 kilograms per hectare over that zone, you're actually underestimating that by 11 kilograms per hectare, whereas the blue zone, the deep zone, has been over-fertilised and therefore requires less fertiliser relative to uniform management. The deep sand, you would expect, what we're looking at here is to actually optimise the production return from the actual deep sand, which usually is non-wetting and holds very low fertilities. So if the farmer was to apply this recommended fertiliser rates, he would actually result in the $1.41 per hectare advantage over the variable rate of nitrogen compared to the uniform rate. $1.41 might not sound much, but when you're working on 1,000 hectare paddocks, it does soon add up. So basically, if this farmer was to achieve his financial benefit, he would need to decrease the amount of fertiliser to the blue and yellow zones and increase the amount to the brown zone, which, if you remember back to that image, actually is 50% of the paddock. So what we came out from our results was that we said the biomass imagery has certainly defined those management zones in the paddock accurately based on those soil types, and this is backed up by our in-season biomass imagery and then our yield results. So if you want to know what the farmer has been looking at across that season, is that here we have the in-season biomass images that were taken on the 22nd of August and 4 weeks later on the... So this is in August and this is almost 4 weeks later. What we're actually showing here is that the area of blue biomass, which is the high levels of biomass, has actually increased from August till September. The August imagery clearly shows those management zones in a better way. You can see the deep sands up here in the red and moving down to the sandy loams. By September we had almost a uniform of the blue biomass, which is very good for the farmer. Just to give you another idea of what we're actually looking at, this is a 70 hectare paddock in the mallee, and again we had those 3 different management zones that were identified. With our yellow is our sandhill running across the paddock here, and our brown mid-slope and the blue flats. This is what the actual farmer was looking at with his biomass imagery, and this imagery was taken in 6th of August through to September. Noticeably is that green area across here, which is actually decreased across that 4-week period, and that is actually put down to a frost event that occurred during that time. As we've said, that satellite imagery is only a tool, and the importance of ground truthing. This area down here, which showed an increase actually didn't, when we were out in ground truth, it didn't actually show what the image was showing us. So that just indicates that ground truthing is critical if you are working with this imagery. It's not an exact science, it's just a tool to help work with the farmers amongst other tools. So we did say that NDVI, it can be used as a tool to help identify those different production zones within the paddock. It's also a useful tool if the farmer hasn't got access to yield mapping. If he doesn't have a precision ag system, then certainly these will definitely be a guide. It is critical that you ground truth it, as we did with our soil testing, and it's essentially the local knowledge of the farmer. And some of the images that we held up, he said, well, this just doesn't apply. So there we go back and investigate and interrogate your data zones again. This data does exist, and it is quite useful, but there are other ways to measure NDVI. There are handheld sets which you can actually take into the paddock, and there's also the use of unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, which for a farmer enables them to send the vehicle up when they need to get that information. We said monitoring their crop progress, and they've had a suspected frost event, then they can send that UAV up and get that information when they require it. Whereas with the satellite, you're waiting for that satellite to pass over, and there may be cloud interference, or there may be a time when the farmer wants that actual information, the satellite is not coming over for a while. Thank you.
Thanks, Bernadette. We've got time for questions. You've been a little busy.
Yeah.